Greetings everyone, my name is DangerMan101 and welcome to my channel. You may have noticed all the other two videos here and wondered what is the main type of content for this channel. Well, after some deep thinking and examination of other YouTubers, I have decided that the general content I will be making for this channel will be reviews, rankings, and countdowns of topics I am interested in. After enjoying similar content creators such as Fuffles Minion and Schaeferless Productions, I thought it would be cool to take my own swing at this type of entertainment and see how it goes, starting with this video. But before we get to that, cue the intro! Now, when thinking about what topic I would first want to talk about, it took me a while to fully land on what I would do. Some of the ideas I had in mind might actually become videos in the future, but as for right now, I fully came to the conclusion of what my first major video would be as soon as I remembered a certain topic of discussion for YouTube as of late.
In this moment, there is no space or time. In this moment, there is only you and I. In this moment, we are free.
Now, for those of you who don't know, which is probably most of you first watching this video, I've been a fan of Death Battle for a long time. Ever since at least mid-season 2, I've been keeping up with this show through both its low points and its insane high points. And since Death Battle has just come back stronger than ever from hiatus recently, I thought that for my first major video, I would rank all 4 episodes that marked this show's return from worst to best. Yeah, I know, not a unique topic to discuss in the community, but that's besides the point. In terms of criteria for this list, it mainly comes down to 2 standard categories of an episode, the analyses and the fight. But I will also be factoring in smaller chunks like the killing blow, the post-analysis, and the music track. For that second one, don't worry, I won't be like every standard versus debater and judge these episodes only by who wins. I will mainly be ranking these on their quality overall, not just the results. Also, keep in mind that this ranking is based on my opinions, and your opinions may be different, so feel free to tell me your thoughts in the comments. Now with that being said, let us commence!
No! None of that! Shame on you!
You know we came back strong when this episode is the weakest link of the bunch. Omni-Man vs. Bardock is still a great episode that I have a lot of fun coming back to. It just unfortunately happens to be the most problematic out of the 4 for me. Barely any of my problems come from the analyses though, it's pretty stellar. Starting with Omni-Man's rundown, I think it does a really good job of basically being a continuation of his analysis against Homelander, as that one mostly focuses on Nolan's character in season 1 of the show, and this one goes more into his character in season 2 and beyond. All backed by some top tier editing from DJ and Max, along with a really solid balance of character and feats. However, I think I actually prefer Bardock's rundown overall. Sure, I would say Nolan's has better editing, but Bardock's does even more in terms of going into the story of the character in question. Which it kinda has by default, as one character doesn't have much to go over without going into non-canon bullshit, and the other has an entire comic run which is only known for the first third by the general audience as of right now. Getting back on topic, even despite the limited amount of media, Bardock's rundown still does really well with giving a new perspective into Dragon Ball's lore, while also having one of my new favorite endings to an analysis in the whole show. The part where Wiz goes into how Bardock's story of obtaining Super Saiyan parallels Goku's in a way genuinely gave me chills. Overall, a great pair of analyses that is somehow not even the best in this batch. As for the fight, there actually isn't too much for me to talk about in terms of actual fighting. Most of the choreography is kinda just your standard Dragon Ball fight. Hard-hitting combos, ki blasts, the works. That doesn't mean there aren't standout moments here though. Due to this being our first non-god level Dragon Ball rep since Season 5, this fight gets to be a lot more grounded in its presentation, while still having great sound design and animation to back it up. Special shoutouts to some of the crunch sounds and the roar of the Great Ape Mouth Laser especially. Speaking of which, it still feels surreal that this is our first showing of this form given its importance in the early stages of Dragon Ball. Even then, its first usage here still provides a great change of pace for the fight. In fact, this is actually one of the first episodes where I noticed how the advantages given to both combatants in the post-analysis are actually shown off in the animation. Bardock constantly outspeeds Nolan and puts him on the back foot with his key attacks, but Nolan is just far too strong for any of them to do visible damage, and can also use his experience to create a distraction so he can land a massive hit. That is of course until Bardock uses his transformations to level the playing field. When he turns Great Ape, he now outmatches Nolan in size and speed, but his feral nature makes him not know to press that and instead try to overpower Nolan, which gets him Mario 64'd. But when he turns Super Saiyan and starts turning the tide with his increased power, it's a completely different story. This transformation might be the best representation of the original Golden Hair in the show's history. The way the form gives Bardock an otherworldly glow and how it is only outshined by the bright blue star in the background is just stunning. This is not even mentioning the vocal side of things. I for sure thought they were going to get Taka to voice him because of TFS, but just like Kovac as Bardock's son last year, Cameron Nakad is able to give his own interpretation of the Saiyan to great success. His battle cries throughout the fight are all stupendous, with the obvious highlight being the aforementioned Super Saiyan transformation, and his spin on Goku's Battle of Gods line especially being sick as hell. That's not to discredit Nolan's side though. By being given an actual fight, Tom Shulk gets to flex his vocal muscles even further as Omni-Man here, showing off much more visible emotion than he ever did against Milk Boy. His delivery of lines like, "You're an embarrassment," and his final line before the killing blow especially stand out as sounding almost exactly like JK himself. Though that unfortunately leads into my list of problems here. First off, while the dialogue itself is pretty great all throughout, as I have shown, I wouldn't say any of it stands out as much as Omnilander's does. The animation shows its fair few mistakes as well, like Bardock's Scouter just disappearing after the sky scuffle, Nolan's model looking off in a few places, and some shots taking a bit longer than needed. The ending is also quite a bit worse in comparison. While the Super Saiyan rushdown and first even clash between the two are both fantastic, all that happens afterwards is just one missed punch, a spin kick, and then the final clash. I feel like they should have included a little bit more to at least show how the two begin to become evenly matched and see Nolan be pushed to his breaking point. While it being short technically makes sense due to Super Saiyan draining Bardock's stamina rapidly, and the kill is actually pretty alright, it still just feels like the climax goes by way too fast with the pacing taking a back seat. I know I probably shouldn't be comparing this to Nolan's previous episodes since they are going for very different tones, but since it revolves around one of the same character, I thought it bears repeating. There is one thing this episode does better than Omnilander though. The track. Despite having a name of similar questionable quality, I think Solid State Invincible captures the tone and theme of the fight and matchup as a whole even better than DIM did. I especially love the parallel between the two tracks, with the "All Those Normal People" lyric originally referring to the remorseless side of Nolan, while its successor highlights the shame he now has for his actions on Earth. Now for the conclusion. Going into this episode, I expected Bardock to take this fight pretty handily, so not only was Nolan winning a genuine shock to me, but I also did not expect this to become one of the most controversial episodes of the entire show. As for my piece on it, while I am not a versus debater in any sense, and I do agree with most of the stuff explained here, I will admit them giving Nolan the entire Viltrum planet feat didn't really sit right with me. That and Bardock's speed gap being even higher than the strength gap for Nolan also seemed like a gigantic lapse in discussion. In hindsight, while I definitely wouldn't say this was the best premiere episode we have gotten, I mean, just look at its recent competition, I still had a great time with it. And even then, it wasn't meant to be amazing. It was mainly meant to show the fans that Death Battle was truly indeed back, and I would definitely say they succeeded with it. I mean, they brought it back with a controversial Dragon Ball episode. It's like they never left. Also, if they bring Nolan back for a third time when his story in the show is fully complete, I'm not really sure who they would pick for him. After his last two matchups, the only major one left would be... yeah, no.
For his neutral special, he wields a gun. His up special fires a gun. His side special invokes gun.
Ironic that the episode that seemed pretty cut and dry in terms of the debate ended up having the most controversy, while the episode that contains one of the most controversial debates in all of Versus had a pretty tame overall reaction to it. Not that I needed it specifically to enjoy Joker vs. Giorno, because this was the one time this year where I knew next to nothing about either character outside of certain guest appearances, so I was excited to learn about them. And I think they did a pretty good job explaining both of their worlds through the analyses. Joker's felt a lot like Trunks' rundown from Season 9, where they still go into the character's backstory, but more heavily focus on the narrative surrounding the series they are from. Except here it makes a lot more sense, as from what I've heard, Joker's a lot more of a self-insert character in his game, though they still include some parts of the game specifically tied to him. I especially love the way they ended it with the "they'll never see it coming" line. That was a perfect choice. Also, this is the only rundown this year to have a straightforward cutaway gag, which, while clearly more low budget than others, still was able to be kinda charming in a silly way to me. Giorno's analysis is just as strong as well. While I at least knew Joker from Smash Bros, I knew next to nothing about Giorno, only that he contained one of the most broken power-ups in anime that I didn't even know the abilities of. Luckily, they were able to verbally and literally show how insane Requiem is as a power-up, especially exemplified by Boomstick's Overload, which is probably my favorite joke in the episode. Aside from that, it was still interesting to hear about Giorno's side of the JoJo story, particularly how he's connected to both Jonathan and Dio, thus making him both a part of the Joestar family and also related to their greatest enemy. Though they don't really lean too much into his connections to his friends like they did with Joker, but I personally didn't mind it that much. It still doesn't drag down these otherwise great analyses. Now for the fight. From what I know of both of these characters, the setup seems pretty logical. It appears to take place in a time where Giorno became a lot more corrupt and ruthless after taking over Passione, which as a result made him a prime target for the Phantom Thieves. As I have said, I am not an expert on either series, but from what I've heard, I think this makes sense. As for the action, it is a blast to watch, with a lot of both fighters' arsenals being put to proper use. Some of my favorite examples being Giorno using his stand powers to turn Joker's bullets into bees and Grappling Hook into a snake, and Joker nullifying Requiem's life effects by using Jack Frost to freeze the environment, all the while being backed up by some fantastic sprite work. Sure, sometimes the sprites can look stiff or slow, but most of those instances are pretty few and far between. And even then, they are mostly counteracted by how gorgeous the fight looks visually. This is honestly one of the best looking sprite fights the show has done maybe ever. It captures the style of both JoJo and Persona beautifully. Shout out particularly to the hand-drawn shots. Not only are they very well spread throughout, but they also provide even more gravitas to some of the most intense parts of the fight. Speaking of which, let's talk about how this climax kicks so much ass. First, gotta give props to the track. Requiem for a Thief sounds exactly like a pairing of both series music and is also catchy as hiffle to listen to on its own. It definitely hits its crescendo around the reveal of Requiem though. The use of the infamous JoJo piano getting louder and more intense as Requiem's Muda Muda barrage gets faster and faster in comparison is amazing. Only to be upstaged by easily my favorite part of the fight. The reveal of the 3D shot of Joker caught me off guard on my first watch, and hearing his friends calling out to him through voice lines from the actual game just added on to the amazing build-up. Before it all explodes as Joker summons Saturnile, which is actually a full-on 3D model to make it stand out as the thief's ultimate trump card. Gotta give props to the voice acting as well. Kevin Rivera returns from Season 10 and absolutely kills it as Joker, building on from Xander Mobus' performance as the character while still giving his own style to the voice masterfully. And it absolutely peaks at the end, with him not only screaming Saturnile as he summons him, but also with his line directly afterwards.
Maybe you didn't hear me before. Checkmate.
Which leads into a tense final clash and ending with a surprisingly gory disintegration kill, sold even more by Kieran Reagan's agonizing death scream. The Persona victory screen at the end is also just the cherry on top of this simply beautiful Sunday. Even if somehow Joker got 0 XP from that, how weak was Giorno? Well, quite weak, as shown by how the conclusion literally skips the category comparison by saying Joker takes all of them and goes straight to Joker vs. Requiem. And while from what I've heard, the use of Eyes of Heaven is from outside the main canon, I must restate that I am not a JoJo guy at all, and this is still counteracted by how funny it is that Dio ruined his own Spawn's chance of winning. Overall, this was a fantastic episode, and probably one of my new favorite sprite fights in the show. Also, apparently, this was supposed to be the Season 11 premiere before Rooster Teeth's shutdown, judging by this Twitter post from Liam and the teaser at the end of Season 10 with the tarot cards. If so, then this would probably have been in my top 3 favorites in its category, which I guess both shows the episode's quality and the interesting competition it would have had.
My name is Monsoon of the Sussy Imposters.
When people were speculating what the finale for this batch of episodes would be, I remember seeing a lot of different ideas that could have been quite the way to go out. I was personally of the Luz vs. Anne opinion, but there was another matchup that many speculated could be the finale that stood out in a major way. And sure enough, here we are. Among Us vs. Fall Guys got quite the reaction out of me just from the Next Time trailer alone, where it seemed from the sand-like background we would be getting something like Luke vs. Paul. Then the crown popped up, a familiar sound was heard, and I immediately knew what we were in for. I legitimately got quite interested in this matchup during the waiting period, as I had actually been playing and watching a lot of Among Us during the past year, and this episode being announced got me to play my first couple of games of Fall Guys, which definitely got my energy up from a certain point of view. But that was all before the episode had even been released. So what did I think? Well, if you've been keeping track of the previous entries, you can probably tell my opinion is far from negative. First off, the analyses are some of the most creative in the show's history. Despite not having much to go over, since these two games are mostly standard in terms of story and arsenal, these rundowns still manage to be investing by how they go into the wacky and quite frankly horrifying lore of these little beanstrosities. I especially love Wiz regretfully telling Boomstick that both characters' designs are their literal skin, and him having an existential crisis over it. Plus, they actually go in a completely separate direction with how both rundowns wrap up, with Among Us ending on a triumphant note about how the crewmates have the drive to band together to survive, while the Fall Guys wrap up on a terrifying note on how these things are a danger to our whole society. Basically a complete swap of the vibes these two games get across. The quality of these analyses are especially aided by Max's fantastic editing, with some of the biggest standouts being this animation of Wiz and Boomstick as crewmates, and this shot of the Fall Guy in an alleyway. I am never taking that type of shortcut again after this. Also, when I said the lore was insane, I truly meant it, because out of all the stuff these two games had, I never would have expected them to use actual Twitter feeds for this, let alone one this absurd. And unlike that last thing, I have already stopped using that component. Go follow my blue sky. Anyways, how about that fight? Well, for starters, this might be the first episode since I think Mob vs. Tatsumaki to toe the line between sprites and hand-drawn in this major a way. Except this one goes much further, where instead of it being around 40 to 50% hand-drawn, it's more like 75% as it progresses. Of course, it starts off in sprites and has several other scenes that use that style later on, but after the change from the Skeld down to the Fall Guys course, hand-drawn basically takes the crown in terms of being the fight's main style. And most of it was brought to life by the man who made this matchup as popular as it was in the first place, Larry Winwood. Which, congratulations to him on making this episode happen and giving it his all to make sure it was truly special. You, sir, should be proud. And that's even before going into the main content of the fight. Just in this first major shot alone, we have so much going on. From yellow Fall Guy and blue crewmate creating the new death battleship, to white contemplating why he's even here, to the blink and you'll miss it foreshadowing of who the imposters are, they managed to showcase so much personality for almost every character without it ever being too much to comprehend. The atmosphere of the Skeld is also represented wonderfully in the limited time it is used, and I especially love the addition of the taskbar that wasn't shown in the sneak peek. But as expected, most of the highlights come afterwards. While I do think the transition between both games is a little confusing, and I also understand the complaints about the Fall Guys courses just being a montage, I still think they did the most they could with it, and even then, we still get some funny moments. Like one of the crewmates getting decapitated by a fan that usually only knocks away a Fall Guy, Blue trying to do his tasks and getting killed for it, and all culminating in a clever twist and really cool transformation of Purple revealing himself as the Red Imposter and trying to take the crown, only to lead into one of my new favorite jokes in the entire series. Not only does the knife not leaving a mark on the Fall Guy work as a reference to Larry's original sprite animation, but the new bit of the imposter stabbing himself to make sure that his knife is indeed sharp and him screaming in pain soon after just took me out. All this without any dialogue whatsoever, and yet it might be my favorite part of the whole fight. I say might be mainly because of what comes soon after. Up till now, this fight has mostly been what I had expected from it. Some fun use of the environment, great animation, and funny contrast between both beans. But somehow, the climax managed to go even further beyond. After a fun little beatdown that ends with them falling off the pillar and into space, both parties get to show off so many of their absurd abilities, and they are all a sight to behold. Special mention to Orange turning into Pac-Man and eating all the ghosts, Red using his pistol to obliterate several of his opponents and a whole planet in this really cool shot, and especially the short but sweet sword duel between the two main beings. All this chaos is also accompanied by an amazing guitar solo from the track Sussy Beans. Never thought I'd see the day when the death battle track would be named that. To quickly touch on it, while this is probably my least favorite of the 4 original tracks we got this year, I still really enjoy listening to it. I like how the opening captures the ominous feeling of the Among Us theme, and the rest of it encapsulates the spirit of a usual Fall Guys game to fit the continuous tone of the fight, which it does really well. Now the ending. I love Pink abandoning the sword clash to chase after the crown. Them having a flash of the future when they think they might have lost is hilarious, and them grabbing the crown to use it as the killing blow was something I was not expecting, but welcomed. Also, capping it off with the Fall Guy being petrified by the mess in front of him, only to get the crown and go into the default dance as the corresponding music plays, was just perfect. Yeah, nothing major to speak about with this fight in terms of story. It's mainly just blind fun with barely any logic to it, which is what most people expected from this match. Not much to say on the conclusion either. Like the matchup itself, the debate was pretty cut and dry overall. Even both of the game's companies agreed on the outcome through their Twitter pages and YouTube comments. Though we still get a good payoff to the fun imposter mystery gag from the Among Us rundown. Which, forgot to mention, I was not expecting the change from the preview of Ringmaster getting voted out instead of Wiz, and was even less expecting Jocelyn to be the other imposter. While this episode isn't as much of a spectacle as Joker vs. Giorno, there is something that makes me overall prefer it. It's just pure dumb fun. Some great analyses that prove to be entertaining while showcasing the crew's love for both games, an animation that is both hilarious and intense without seeming unfitting for either bean type, and just an overall entertaining feeling throughout. This is all I could have asked for out of such a WTF matchup like this. Now that I think about it, this actually might be a contender for my favorite joke episode in the series. But even with all that in mind, the top spot wasn't even a debate for me.
I went to go vote and I saw a person with Bowser's fat ass in line.
I mean, what do I even say at this point? Bowser vs. Eggman has quickly garnered a reputation as one of, if not the best episode Death Battle has ever made. And as you can tell, I do not disagree whatsoever. Though back in the day, I actually wasn't as big a fan of this matchup as I am now. I got the connection of these two being the nemesis of two of the most iconic characters in gaming, but I thought the overall design difference would make it too much of a stomp in Bowser's favor. However, that was until I took into account everything they had and could use. Soon after, I began to realize that this had potential to be one for the books. That, and Bowser and Eggman being two of my favorite villains in fiction that needed runbacks ASAP, didn't exactly hurt either. And once it was announced not only as one of the first 4 episodes we would be getting for the Kickstarter, but that they were also giving them their entire armies, and it was going to be fully hand-drawn by Moro, the man behind Indie Cross, this was absolutely the most hyped I had been for an episode in a while. And it did not disappoint whatsoever. To start off, the analyses here are some of my favorites ever. Not only do they cover both villains' abilities and stories really well on their own, while also adding in some great jokes to balance it out, some of my favorites being Boomstick getting robbed in Mario Party and the truth about his Doom buggy, but they also managed to put as much detail into discussing their massive armies, especially with the ginormous sidebars detailing both sides down to the most minor of members. Speaking of details, this might have the best editing in the show's history. This was DJ Tiki's passion project, and these rundowns show it all throughout. There are so many visual edits, whether big or small, that make these segments stand out in such a big way. And some of them I bet most people didn't even notice on their first watch. From the Chris Pratt block, to Eggman waving his finger, to the dramatic reveal of their armies, and even down to how they use footage from games that had literally been released weeks prior to the episode's release, it's safe to say DJ's outdone himself yet again. He's not even the only one to credit here, though. We also have Origin adding in these hilarious little sprite segments during the introduction of both main combatants, and custom 3D animations made by Luis of them standing triumphant over their enemies. Those in particular add even more to the amazing endings for both rundowns that showcase both the softer sides of Bowser and Eggman respectively, while still displaying them as tyrannical threats that are not to be taken lightly whatsoever. You know an episode is good when I have this much to say on just the analyses. The only thing that keeps me from saying these are my favorites of the show is that we live in a time where Bill Cord and GVS 3 exist. But even then, these rundowns come really close to their quality and are still a series standout. And have you noticed that I haven't even spoken about the fight yet? Well, even before it starts, we have an amazing setup. As you have seen, the other episodes in this batch have had pretty self-explanatory reasons for why the combatants are fighting in the first place. One even basically had it cut out for them. But this is the only episode here where I genuinely did not see the setup coming. Eggman setting up an entire wedding for Bowser only to reveal it was a ruse so he can make his big announcement to the king and all his major leaders is such a good way to bring both armies together, and also highlights how much of a troll the Doctor can be sometimes. Also, how about that animation? I'm sorry, how the frick did Moro do this all himself? I mean, I knew the man was good at his job, but not this good. There is so much going on throughout this entire literal war, and yet the animation never takes a nosedive for anything. Just the shot of both armies staring off shows the amount of effort Moro truly put into this. In fact, for possibly the first time ever, the animator added more than the storyboards, as a lot of what was included in the official animation was not present in the original draft, with one of the only exceptions being the inclusion of the Koopalings. And while it was sad not seeing them, their absence is immediately counteracted by literally everything else here. There is quite a bit to cover, but I'll try to condense it as best I can. As soon as the fight begins, we see so many more of Bowser's abilities utilized than they ever were against Ganondorf. From his dropkick from Smash, to his meteor breath from Galaxy, to the unique portrayal of his dark magic, and much more creative use of his shell against the Egg Dragoon. He even uses his earth manipulation from the RPG to skewer it with spikes. Bowser also has his own voice actor this time in the form of Zach Watkins, and he does a fantastic job capturing Bowser's boastful and aggressive attitude, while also transitioning very well to his more serious side towards the latter half. One of my favorite lines from him especially is him mocking Eggman and his forces, only for Ivo to immediately reveal he was speaking to a decoy in utter disbelief that his foe actually fell for it. Speaking of which, while I was hoping for Alfred to come in, Arthur Romeo still gives a great performance, showing off Eggman's intelligence and much more callous attitude all throughout. However, as I have mentioned, these two aren't the only ones to get their time to shine. Several of the more prominent members of their armies also get their just amount of stuff to do. Infinite being able to actually dispose of some of Bowser's major commanders, only for King Boo to take him out of the fight with a thwomp, Junior backing up his dad in any moment he can, Kamek and Sage using magic and technology respectively for effective strategies, and we even get to see the fodder try to take the Phantom Ruby for either side once Infinite's been fraud checked. Though I think I might have missed someone. Oh yes, easily the standout character of this whole animation, Metal Sonic. He had actually been scouting out the enemy in the background earlier on, and once he gets fully in on the action, it is an absolute treat. As obviously the biggest muscle on Eggman's side, Metal gets to use every second of his screen time to show how much of a powerhouse he is, without stealing the entire show like last time. Literally within his first major scene, he is able to nab the Phantom Ruby and hold on to it despite everything Bowser throws at him, including the Broggy Bonker my beloved, while also taking King Boo completely out of the fight by flicking his crown off. Metal's evasiveness doesn't last long, however, as he then falls prey to possibly one of the funniest things to happen to any combatant on Death Battle. Becoming a victim of... Metal's reaction to being f***ed over is amazing, and his immediate response being to turn into Neo is pretty realistic judging from my own experiences with that dreaded space. Said transformation is also one of the rawest we have ever gotten, and it still has competition in this very fight. Metal's voice clip and the Dutch-angled camera giving him an insane air of menace, coupled with the Mario-esque background being covered in a dark cloud of smoke as he slowly walks forward, makes this form stand out more than it ever did in either of its other appearances. And that's all before Metal incapacitates Bowser with a single kick. You can literally see his eyes are pure white before he hits the ground. He is out. And yet, after Eggman enters the battlefield in the Death Egg robot and Metal's cute little thumbs up to his master, we bear witness to the other contender for the best transformation in not just this fight, but maybe all of Death Battle.
Showtime!
This moment is nothing short of awe-inspiring, and that can all be attributed to the animation, especially with how smooth and almost shot-for-shot the form's entrance is to the original. Plus, similar to Satin Isle from earlier, most of the shots showcasing Fury Bowser are actually using a 3D model, which not only makes him stand out on another level, but it's also retextured so well into the fight that you can barely tell it apart. On top of that, as soon as Fury Bowser is revealed, he's easily able to knock away Metal even despite his attempted defense, and as a result, this causes Eggman to stumble. Yet he still remains on guard as Bowser charges forward. All of this comes together right here. I don't need to explain why this shot goes so hard. I mean, if you have functioning eyes and ears, you should understand. I say ears as well because while all of this is going on, we listen to one of Brandon Yates' finest musical achievements. Game Over. While this is not my favorite track in the series, it does come dang close. From the rocking guitar remix of Eggman's theme from Adventure 2, to that godlike track art, to the insane lyrics that reflect the ambitions of both rulers, or the fact that they got Victor Barry the Light Borba to voice said lyrics again, every single element of this song comes together to make the animation all the more special, and it has had an unbreakable grip on me ever since it came out. Anyways, after the aforementioned punch clash, Bowser continues to push his assault regardless of Sage's best efforts to protect Eggman, only to be brought to a halt by Metal going super and holding him up with one hand. Did I already mention how beautiful some of these shots look? Also, despite how for most of the characters aside from the main two they used voice clips instead of actual voice actors, the ones used work perfectly for each scene. Especially here with the iconic line, "I'll crush you!" Metal once again gets to show the amount of power he has behind him as he pushes Bowser back, blasts through the pipes Kamek used, and manages to take both him and Junior out of the fight in one hit each. Though of course this does not sit well with the Koopa King, who then goes on to deliver what might be my favorite line read in all of Death Battle.
How dare you keep your hands off my...
I cannot stress enough how well Zack channels the Koopa King's fiery rage here, and it is even more sold by how he doesn't just use a power star, he uses a grand star. And even despite Metal copying and countering with his own blast, Bowser's fire breath is enough to overpower him, vaporize both him and the entire egg fleet, and then continues on to create a flipping black hole. All the while complemented by some of the most insanely gorgeous visuals the show has ever seen. With his army nearly depleted and his mech rendered beyond repair by just one attack, Eggman is left with only one option. The Death Egg. We then get this amazing reveal as what we thought was the moon lights up, moves to the side, and begins powering up. And what follows this is a contender for my favorite scene the show has ever concocted. As Sage fires the Super Laser Piss straight towards the battlefield, planning to wipe out both sides if necessary, Eggman only fears for his own life and begins to make a break for it via the Eggmobile. But Bowser sees the threat this poses not just to him, but his own troops, and jumps in front of the attack, tanking it for his own army, and seemingly getting his body obliterated. But after a really effective fake-out that makes it seem like Eggman is home free, we get a raw-as-hell reveal that Junior supposedly revived Dry Bowser with its magic just like he did in Mario Bros. DS. Eggman, while surprised, still believes he has control, only to realize the blast that Junior seemingly missed him with was actually aimed at the former Death Egg, now turned into a moon-sized question block. He doesn't get that long to take this in, however, as Bowser begins to pull him in with his vacuum breath, but not without Eggman trying to use everything he has to escape. His jetpack, his Genesis run, and then he just tries to use his pistol, only for it to be turned into cardboard. Who would have thought the Koopa Egg War started with cardboard and ended with cardboard? Even though it technically ends with one of the rawest killing blows in Death Battle. Not only do the impact frames here go hard, especially the OMG So Retro one, but Eggman's death scream also legitimately sounds like something right out of the games. And holy hiffle, that final shot is the stuff of legends. You know, I tried to shorten this segment as much as I could, and yet it still came out longer than nearly all the other segments combined. But that's because there's just so much stuff to talk about in not just this animation, but the entire episode as a whole. 2 incredible rundowns that delve into both combatants' inner character, a fight that has some of the most gorgeous hand-drawn animation to ever grace YouTube, flawless writing for every character involved, too many wallpaper-worthy shots to count, an outstanding music track that brings even more scale to the fight, and to bring it up now, one of the best written conclusions to any episode. They make sure to go into almost every possible outcome imaginable for this fight, even including alternate scenarios regarding certain abilities not used in the animation. You can only imagine the look of shock and hilarity on my face when I realized Castle Bowser could have just turned Lightman into a Goomba. And while I have seen some people disagree with a few of the claims here, thinking it might have made this feel too one-sided, once again, I am not a versus debater in any sense, and also I was hoping for Bowser to win anyway, so a dub is a dub. Still, it feels so surreal that only 3 episodes after returning from hiatus, Death Battle managed to create something that is not only this high quality, but also stands above almost every other episode in the show's history. I mean, you must have noticed how I kept calling every other aspect of this my favorite thing ever, right? And I didn't even go into all the major details yet. But if you want a more proper analysis of this episode that isn't supposed to be a minimized segment of a ranking video, feel free to let me know in the comments. Or go check out these reviews as well, they're really good too. Though that then leads into the big question, is this my favorite death battle of all time? Well, yes and no. While technically speaking, yes, I would say this is my absolute favorite, there is still one other episode that stands above it for me, purely because of bias. But I will be speaking more about that in the future. For now, massive props to everyone on the writing, animation, and every other team that made this masterpiece come to fruition. Particularly DJ and Moro. These two are some of the most talented members to ever join Death Battle, and they both put their all into making this episode as special as it could be. I honestly never would have expected most of Season 10's highest to be given too much competition, let alone this early, but color me happily surprised. All I can say is, behold the king. And that was the return of Death Battle. I can now say more than ever, we are so fucking back. After so much suspense and dread following Rooster Teeth's shutdown, only for the Death Battle team to come back with an overly successful Kickstarter and returning with 4 exceptional episodes, it's all just been so surreal to experience. And actually, I didn't experience it alone. For the first time ever, I got to participate in RaccoonBroVA's reactions to all these episodes. I'll show a link in the description if you want to go check them out and see me cheer for the funny turtle dragon. And if Death Battle continues with their new Sunday release schedule, I also plan on participating in every reaction to Death Battle's 2025 episodes, which are still keeping up the great quality these first 4 set. I can't wait to see what Death Battle has in store for us for the rest of the year, and I am just as much thankful to not just the crew, but everyone who supported the Kickstarter and made sure this show could continue even without its main company. Death Battle means so much to so many people, myself included, and 2024 was such a stressful year for us as fans. But now, thanks to us, our favorite show can continue on its own 2 feet for as much time as it needs. I mean, as long as it causes chaos in the fan bases, I'm down. This is Dangerman 101, signing off. Take care, everybody.